Welcome to the PreSnap Podcast presented by LineStar. Alongside Tyler Wiemann, I'm Shannon Sommerville, and today on the show we are going over the most overrated players heading into the 2024 season on Underdog Fantasy Best Ball. By the way, if you don't already have Underdog Fantasy, make sure you download it. Use the promo code LineStar to get up to $100 of your first deposit match, so make sure to use that promo code below and get yourself a nice deposit match there. Best ball season is here. The season's fast approaching. Blink and we will be right there in week one. So get ready for it. And if you haven't already, get into these best ball drafts because it's a ton of fun and there's tons of prizes to be had. But I'm excited about today's topic, most overrated. Because you know when you just get burned by a fantasy player, you don't want to have that feeling again in 2024. I thought we would start things off by going over maybe last year's bust and then taking a look at who could potentially be sort of a bust in terms of best ball and where they're going in the draft right now on Underdog Fantasy. And just taking a look at some players who we think might just be getting overdrafted right now, maybe a little overhyped. We're here to put the stop signs up, or at least, the caution signs before you draft these guys and get too heavy in on them. So here we go. Let's start things off with last year's recap of 2023. Tyler, we were kind of talking before the show about, some guys that burned us last year in fantasy football. So here's our list here. We've got Tony Pollard, Bijan Robinson, Stephon Diggs, T. Higgins, Patrick Mahomes, Austin Ekeler. Thing about a Tony Pollard, it was all about opportunity, right? And with Ezekiel Elliott going to New England, we thought for sure Tony Pollard's going to have a great year, but just didn't have the efficiency numbers on offense whatsoever. Then you had Bijan Robinson, who everyone thought was going to be just have an awesome season, which he did have a good season, finished RB11, but we're expecting more of him, and especially people are drafting him really early in Underdog Fantasy Best Ball drafts. Stephon Diggs had a great first half, but second half was just kind of dropped off a bit. T. Higgins, although you could make the argument that was more related to injury and the lack of Joe Burrow throwing him the football last season. And then you also had Patrick Mahomes, Austin Ekeler. Now, Patrick Mahomes was an interesting one that you brought up, so I'll let you kind of take it away on Patrick Mahomes and his disappointing fantasy season, although he came home with a Super Bowl. So
yeah, that's what I'm laughing about.
It's kind of funny.
We have him on the fantasy. Yeah, we have him on the fantasy bus, but he won the Super Bowl. And I mean, he finished as the quarterback 8, and he's a guy that you're drafting as, a top 3 quarterback. And when you're going that high with a quarterback, you really, really need that top 3 type level of output. And he just simply was not that. Didn't have that many weeks where he really blew up. Those big boom weeks from him were gone that, we had seen many years prior. Mm-hmm. And that Chiefs offense just ran the ball a little bit more. They played a little slower. The defense was really solid. They didn't need to have those huge games. And because of that, Mahomes didn't really.
Yeah. So it's interesting to kind of look back on last season, but there are lessons to be had there, which is why I bring this up, because things that we're looking for, has the team changed? Has the chemistry changed? Has the coaches changed? Those are factors that can play into it. On the Kansas City Chiefs, they had a lot of personnel changes, which made them kind of shift their approach, especially on offense, given the lack of offensive weapons that they had. They focused more on building up that defense, which was great last season and helped them get a Super Bowl. But from a fantasy perspective, not so great for some of those, for Patrick Mahomes numbers, for example. So those are the kind of things that we're looking into for 2024, things that we know, patterns that we can kind of project and anticipate. So let's start things off. And as always, if you got a comment, if you disagree with us, we want to hear from you in the comments. This is what's fun about the most overrated list, is it always causes a lot of controversy, which we love here. We want to hear from you guys in the comments. Of course, a nice discourse, friendly discourse, always, promotes some good thought and discussion as you guys head into your fantasy best ball draft. So we want to hear from you guys in the comments. And if you could do us a favor while you're at it, like this video, subscribe to the channel as well. That would be awesome. Let's get into it. Let's start things off with George Pickens, which was painful for me, Tyler, as you know, being the Georgia Bulldog that I am. Although ADP 42.7, I can kind of see what your point is here. Wide receiver 28 off the board. Now, last season finished wide receiver 23. 63 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns. And while you look at the situation in Pittsburgh and Deontay Johnson now with the Carolina Panthers, you think he should be the prime beneficiary of that absence, but they also drafted a rookie third rounder, Roman Wilson, and you're looking at an entirely different offense, new offensive coordinator. So what are the things that give you pause about going after George Pickens in best ball?
My biggest thing here is that it's Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith has a ton of weapons at his disposal, just like he did in Atlanta, and no pass catcher was, anywhere close to ADP 42 last year for them. They had Drake London, they had Pitts, both underwhelmed, both were under 1,000 yards, and I think there's a very good chance we see that again. We have a situation where they just invested big time in offensive line. They have two good running backs. They have Russell Wilson at the quarterback spot. There's a lot of good talent on this team. I just don't think the passing volume is going to be there for Pickens. And the other thing is there has been talk about them trying to bring in another receiver. So if you do add another receiver to it, it even makes it harder for George Pickens there. But altogether, I like him as a talent. I just hate his situation. And Arthur Smith going there, he is going to run the heck out of the ball. And we know Mike Tomlin wants to do that too. So
there is maybe no offensive coordinator who frustrated fantasy owners more last season than Arthur Smith last year with the Atlanta Falcons and some of the weapons he had at his disposal, but was seemingly inconsistent week to week on which ones he was going to be using. So continued to flummox fantasy owners last season. So that could be the case with the Steelers. And in fact, Steelers have always kind of been very run heavy to begin with. So I like your logic there. I still love George Pickens. I mean, he's got some insane acrobatic catches that are highlight reel worthy, but is that going to produce fantasy points and give you those points that you need so desperately in best ball to advance in a tournament? Not sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to last year the Falcons threw the ball 31 times a game. That's just not enough to, really make me think that Pickens could be a deal at his ADP.
Yeah, and when you think about the Steelers, they're so predicated on their defense and TJ Watt and everything that they, really haven't, in terms of Mike Tomlin as their head coach, I guess they've always just kind of relied on being a defensive team. And another point that when we were talking before the show is the teams that they're playing against in the AFC North, I mean, they're all great secondaries too. So not only is it a volume situation, but you're going up against some of the best secondaries in the league week in and week out. So that also has me a little bit concerned about where George Pickens is going currently in the good old ADP at wide receiver 28 right now. So I'm holding off right now. Next up, let's go to Calvin Ridley, who's got himself a new spot in Tennessee. Wide receiver 42 off the board right now. Last season, he had a great year. Wide receiver 17 in total fantasy points, 76 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. But Tyler, I remember prop betting on his receiving yards from week to week, and this was a guy who was very inconsistent from week to week, which I think is also kind of a reflection of the Jaguars' offense that he was on. But what do you expect from him now, going to what arguably worse quarterback situation, and now with maybe even more competition for targets?
Yeah, that's my whole thing here. He's going to a worse QB situation, a worse offense with Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks, Okongwu, all are competing for those targets. And while I do think Tennessee's offense passes a lot more, all that competition isn't good for him. He was, wide receiver 1 or 1A to Kirk's 1B last year. Now he's definitely the wide receiver 2 behind Hopkins. And as far as routes run situation, he was number 3 in routes run last year. He ran a ton of routes, still finished as number 17 for fantasy points. He had 0.36 fantasy point per route run, which ranked 49th at the position. He only had a 47.5 route win rate. So I think all of that kind of coming together with the downgrades to the offense as a whole is just going to be a little bit hard for him to really succeed at this ADP.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a great talent for sure. And even last season, we were talking about him to keep an eye on as you headed into the season because there was a lot of unknowns. Him coming off that suspension, coming back, how would he be, game wise? And he was great week 1 and continued to put up some pretty good numbers. He finished top 20 in fantasy points, so not bad there. But now going to a worse situation, you can't really expect like the same output, in my opinion. I think you're on the same page with me there about that one. So maybe just use some caution with Calvin Ridley going to maybe a worse situation, I guess, is what we're concerned about here at Tennessee. All right, next let's go to the Indianapolis Colts and A.D. Mitchell. We got a rookie on the list here, former Georgia guy, well, most recently Texas, but ADP 117, wide receiver, 71 off the board. And he was a second-round pick 52 by the Colts, and they drafted him because of his strong hands, vertical threat. But Indianapolis has a ton of mouths to feed on offense. They've got Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce. We've also got Anthony Richardson back, so a different quarterback situation than what we saw last year. Of course, Anthony Richardson showed some promise, and that he could hit the deep ball, which is what you want to see when you have A.D. Mitchell. But I just think when he was at Texas, Tyler, he played second fiddle to Xavier Worthy all season long. So now you're expecting, I don't know. I guess there is some concern here for me with where he's currently going.
I think there's major concern. And I mean, you're talking about a team which, with Anthony Richardson as the quarterback, they threw the ball 21 attempts per game. Now you talk about everybody's competing to targets with Pittman, Downs, Pierce, Jonathan Taylor. There's just so many mouths to feed that he's not going to get the targets. I think that all year it's going to be a situation for him. He gets 3 to 5 targets. If he hits a deep ball, he might be worthy, but it's literally going to be so boom bust, and giving that kind of draft value is just, I think, a way overpay. And I really need to see this number come down big time ADP wise. I think that people are just excited because he's a rookie. You're always looking to find those rookies that really go nuts. I just don't think it's him. And mainly more so due to the situation than anything else. Will Anthony Richardson pass a little more? Probably. He probably will pass a little bit more, but do I expect to go from 21 to 40? No. 21 to 30? I still don't really know. I mean, they are going to be a bottom tier volume passing team. So those quarterbacks or those wide receivers on those teams, if you are not the stud, there's not going to be much left for you.
Yep. All right, next up, let's go to a running back who is actually, we had him on our bust list from last season. Unfortunately, Austin Ekeler makes our most overrated players in best ball right now. ADP 124, wide receiver 37. Last season finished RB 31 in total fantasy points, which was a total bummer for those like myself that drafted him a little bit higher than that. 179 carries, 628 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, which was well below the previous year where he had almost 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns and was just a monster for fantasy. He did have an ankle injury that he suffered week 1. It was a high ankle sprain, and it seemed to kind of linger throughout the season. He did have more than 16 points weeks 7, 8, and 9, but just kind of fell off and was really inconsistent. And when you were looking at some of his efficiency numbers, just the explosiveness wasn't there for him last season. And as he's entering his age 29 season, that's something that is a real concern as you approach 2024. What is your assessment now with the Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up his age. He looked all of his age last year. He looked old and slow, and we have some data that kind of backs it up. He just wasn't the same guy. Maybe it was the early season high ankle sprain, but now he's in a different situation. There's a news report that came out today that he's going to be involved in kick returns. That just does not bode well for a guy that needs volume to really succeed. This is a guy that ranked 62nd in true yards per carry last season. For expected points added, he was negative 46.8, ranked 146. all that, and he has good competition. I actually like Brian Robinson as a back. I think he's a solid player. I just don't think the volume is going to be there, and it's not going to be enough for him in my mind. So I'm kind of out on Ekeler.
Another point that I saw being made actually on a Chargers fan message board was basically that they lost their center, I believe week 4, the Chargers did last year. Corey Linsley, which they found out he had a heart issue. And so he's done. And it was very, you looked at the numbers when he was out and when Austin Ekeler, really, he was a pivotal person for Austin Ekeler to have the numbers that he did. And him being out, I also think probably contributed to his lack of efficiency on offense. That offensive line for the Chargers kind of was falling apart in certain spots. Either way, those numbers don't lie. I mean, those are some pretty good stats there to illustrate just the kind of drop off that we saw from Austin Ekeler. So, I mean, hey, you never know. We might see the air guitar celebration, which was one of my favorites, of course, in fantasy football. But I don't know. I'm a little wary of the Washington Commanders. See what they got in store for 2024 and where he fits into the whole mix. That's really my question there. And as you mentioned, some reports coming out that he's on the kick return team. That doesn't bode well for confidence in, I guess, where he fits into their scheme. So something definitely to take note of for this season. And lastly, I'm very looking forward to talking about this particular player because, quite frankly, this player made me look stupid last year. I'm talking about Quentin Johnston, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. He was great at TCU, and I thought he was going to have a phenomenal rookie season. So I was singing his praises. I should have known, though, Tyler, because when he played the Dogs in the national championship 2 years ago, the Bulldogs were able to contain him, and I should have known then that I shouldn't have put all my faith in a TCU frog. I mean, what was I thinking? But when you saw him last season, he just didn't seem to be able to put the pieces together. He's definitely got the skills and the ability, but it seemed even towards the end of the season that people within the Chargers organization just really lacked faith and confidence in him. And even though that they've gotten rid of a lot of their receivers this season and the opportunity is there, I just don't know if he can capitalize. What's your assessment of his position?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think he looks like a classic draft bust. This is a guy that when Herbert was targeting him, Herbert only had a 79.9% quarterback rating. Herbert's quarterback rating for the year was a 93.2. So it was a huge downgrade to him over anybody else. He only had 0.2 fantasy points per route run that ranked 88th, which is, well below wide receiver 68 where he's going. Only a 20% win rate versus man coverage. He only won on 34% of all routes run, which is ranked 129th. He just didn't care. And then there were so many reports last year that he would line up in the wrong spots and didn't really know the playbook, which to me all comes down to he probably isn't working hard. And even if he has opportunity now, if he's not working, it's not going to happen for him. They lost Keenan Allen, they lost Mike Williams, but they drafted 2 receivers. They signed DJ Chark. They have Joshua Palmer. There's still guys to throw the ball to. I don't think it's a situation where they have to go to him.
Yeah, and the other situation there, Greg Roman, we were all expecting a more run-heavy approach on offense, which definitely takes away from some of the wide receivers and Quentin Johnston's opportunities there. Another thing that when I think of Quentin Johnston, just the opportunity that he was afforded last year with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, both hurt. He just wasn't able to capitalize on it. I remember this week 11 game against the Packers, and he had this drop at the end of the game in the fourth quarter that basically cost the Chargers the game. And I think that's just kind of like a microcosm of his career in the NFL so far. He just has not been able to capitalize. Reports are coming out of camp that everyone's got so much confidence, but I just think that's like the nature of reports coming out of camp this time of year. It's like everyone's great and everyone's showing promise, and so you kind of have to figure out what's real and what's not.
There's so much coach speak for this time of year. You kind of just can't even listen to any of it.
Exactly. Everyone's great. Everyone's showing promise. Doesn't matter if people don't show up. They're great. Everything's fine. It's all roses. Nothing
Oh
to see here.
boy.
Keep it.
Oh, the Jets got you in your feels today, huh?
Oh boy, lots of people not showing up at Jets camp. That's okay. Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here. Yeah, being a Jets
Room's
fan
on
is
fire. You're all right.
we're all good. It's like that meme with the guy who's like
Yep.
the little dog that's on whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about. All right,
Drinking
so
his
those
coffee.
are our overrated players, but we do want to hear from you guys. Let us know who you think might be overrated, or if you completely disagree and you think one of the players here is going to have an absolute monster season. Hey, it could happen. Let us know in the comments. Want to hear from you guys. Also, if you could give us a like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. We've also got tons of other content. Today's video was most overrated, but we've also got some sleeper picks as well. And we've gone through it at the quarterback position, tight end, wide receiver, and running back. So check out those videos if you haven't already to get ready for your Underdog Fantasy Best Ball drafts. And if you haven't yet, make sure to download Underdog Fantasy and get in on those drafts. It's so much fun. Great way to play fantasy football without the hassle of week-to-week lineup adjustments. You just draft and that's about it. The fun of fantasy football without the management during the season, which can be tough. Hey, we're all busy. We get caught up in things. So best ball's a fun way to get into the mix there and, hey, win some money. There's a lot on the line in this. Tyler, how's your best ball drafting going?
Good. It's
Yeah?
good. We're well into best ball summer. I'm loving it.
Let's do it. All right. And also make sure to check out the LineStar app. All your DFS prop betting needs at your fingertips. And plus, we'll be coming out with a best ball tool that's coming your way soon on the LineStar app. So check it out at linestarapp.com. That's going to do it for us today on the PreSnap Podcast. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one, guys. Bye.